Hey, thank you so much, Ruchi. Really appreciate that. So, good afternoon to you all. Welcome to the webinar. So today, unlike the other webinar series, other webinars in the series, today's will be devoted for industry updates. So for the first hour, we are going to devote on turfgrass, and the second hour we are going to devote on ornamentals. So it'll be updates. That's the kind of is kind of a little different from the other webinars in the previous four we had this year. So our first speaker is Dr. Benjamin Pritchard. So Dr. Benjamin Pritchard is an assistant professor of turfgrass weed science in the Department of Crop and Soil Sciences at the University of Georgia Griffin campus. His work focuses on integrated weed management strategies and herbicide efficacy in turfgrass systems, with an emphasis on sustainable practices for golf courses, sports fields, and lawns. Dr. Pritchard earned his PhD in plant, soil, and environmental sciences from the University of Tennessee, where his research explored novel herbicide technologies for turfgrass weed control. He continued to advance turfgrass science through applied research, extension outreach, and collaboration with industry professionals. Welcome, Dr. Pritchard. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Joseph. I appreciate that introduction, and let me get my slide shared here, and then we'll get to going. Alrighty. So look good?
Looks perfect,
Yes.
Ben.
Okay, perfect. Alrighty. Again, Dr. Joseph, thank you for that introduction. And I'm happy to be speaking with you all today. So a little bit of an overview. We're just going to be talking a little bit of updates. So I did just start in this position as of July 1st of this year. I came from the University of Tennessee, like Dr. Joseph was mentioning. And I'm going to talk just a little bit about what I've seen so far in the first 4.5 months I've been here, and also some stuff to keep on the lookout for in the next couple months from a turfgrass weed science perspective. So we'll get into it. First thing we'll talk about is a little bit of my background. Dr. Joseph mentioned a little bit about this, but I thought I'd go through it. So I started at the University of Tennessee in fall of 2017. There, during my undergrad, I did my plant sciences degree in science and production horticulture. So I actually did not start in turf. I did not get into turf until I actually was looking for a job during my sophomore year and wanted and got an email about the Turfgrass Weed Science Lab looking for undergraduate research assistants. I applied, went to interview, got the job, and then I've just like never looked back from staying in turf. I still decided, finish my degree in science and production horticulture as I was already pretty far into the program. But I've been working in turfgrass weed science since I think that would be like the fall of 2018. And I've been very happy ever since working with Dr. Jim Brosnan up there. And then from there, I did a thesis in my undergrad with Dr. Brosnan looking at herbicide resistance potentially in two summer annual grassy weeds. That was with crabgrass and goosegrass. Neither population ended up being resistant, thankfully, for the people we were testing them for. But that's sort of what I worked on there, where I got my feet wet. And then Dr. Brosnan and the turfgrass team there convinced me to stay on for my master's, where I was dealing with Indaziflam resistance or spectacle flow resistance. We're talking about for turf labeling. Pretty much there, I was through the SCRI project, which is a federal grant nationally. They collected a bunch of samples looking for POA annua resistance and screening for POA annua resistance across the nation. And so what happened there is there was a bunch of samples that was collected from this federal grant. And then my thing was to develop, there was not an assay specifically besides just sort of greenhouse screenings to determine POA annua resistance. So I took that time frame, from 4 or 5 months in the greenhouse potentially down to 14 days in the lab. I'm looking for Indaziflam resistance and screening for that in annual bluegrass populations. Then my PhD, again, Dr. Brosnan convinced me to stay on. Stay at the University of Tennessee. It was a great decision. And there I worked with Tetflupyrolimet, which is a novel mode of action herbicide. It's actually group 28. So if you look up, you'll find it in some of the science societies, but there's not anything else on it in terms of from a commercial standpoint. However, I was talking with some people recently. There is hope that maybe will be coming to the market later in the 2020s, hopefully 27, 28. but it is pretty much, the idea is it's really good on annual bluegrass or in crabgrass. So it should be another tool specifically for warm season grasses for that pre-emergent timing applications. And that's what led me to the University of Georgia. I graduated in May of 25 and started here July 1st. It's been 4.5 months. What have I been asked about so far? What have I been seeing? And, sort of the resources I've seen that are a little bit lacking, or, where I'm going to be sort of heading in the direction here soon. So a big thing that I got a lot of questions about was turfgrass versus turfgrass. So, how do I get Bermuda grass out of my Zoysiagrass? How do I get centipede grass out of my Bermuda grass? How do I get Bermuda grass out of my centipede grass? There was some resources I found specifically from my predecessor, Patrick McCullough, on this. There's multiple extension pubs and stuff like that, but those are a little bit outdated. There's some newer stuff that has been done in terms of scientific literature. And so over the next couple months and next like 6 months to a year, I'm really going to be working on updating some of those resources and getting a lot more, some of that newer updated stuff for you all, specifically working on that. And obviously this is going to be an ongoing issue and an ongoing thing that I'll probably look at in my program. Prostrate Spurge is the other one that I got a lot of questions about. Obviously, you get a lot of questions about summer annual grassy weeds or in general grassy weeds. So, I had the Dallisgrass, had the goosegrass, had the crabgrass questions, but by far, even probably more than crabgrass questions, I got asked about Prostrate Spurge this year. So I was talking with some of my colleagues. This is not just a Georgia thing. This is like a nationwide thing. It seemed like there was a lot of issues with control this year, specifically in areas that were really dry after they were really wet early in that like summer season / late spring. So, we had that pretty wet late spring, early summer, a little bit more moderate temperatures, and it was really hot and dry there like for a month or two, probably in peak, when you're thinking about spraying or putting out some granular for those, cleaning up those summer annual broadleafs. Prostrate Spurge specifically, has like really waxy stem, and it's pretty waxy overall. And so sort of the hypothesis there right now, without really doing any research, is probably that the herbicides were having trouble getting into the plant, or what was getting in was not enough to really kill it, or it was being really a lot slower than what it would have been in the past. If you were putting it out in irrigated areas, you may not have seen this issue as much, but I still heard some issues even with irrigated areas just with how dry it was. But this is something I'm going to continue looking into, and I actually already have put out a trial I'll talk about here in a second. But this is something I'm going to continue looking into, and hopefully, having a little bit better idea and potentially putting out some more trials next summer to evaluate, to get some better control on this problematic weed we saw this year. So what am I doing? I worked with Dr. Schwartz down in Tifton. They were some of the people that were having issues with control this summer. And so recently, about 3 weeks ago, I actually worked with Dr. Schwartz to put together a trial list of, putting out some herbicides that like aren't normally as safe as you would maybe think or would want them to be always, or you would think they would be on specifically his new Tifshade Zoysia japonica. So Tifshade is going commercial next year. It's his new Zoysia japonica, or his lab's new Zoysia japonica coming out. What I did here was we put out some rates and also herbicides that like either are on the label or aren't on the label for broadleaf specifically, as well as some grassy annual weed control, but specifically, putting out some of those like Dismiss NXT, Dismiss South, some of those PPO inhibitors with like carfentrazone, sulfentrazone, put out some low rates of glyphosate, just looking at what the tolerance of this grass would be to some of these like hotter herbicides herbicides that are generally hotter on these zoysias. And so the idea here, you can sort of see some of this damage specifically. Was 2 weeks or at 2 weeks. No, sorry. This was actually taken this week. This is at 3 weeks, showing some of that damage. We put out a lot of high rates, even of those 2,4-Ds, Ticambas, Microprop sort of mixtures like Trimet Classic. Really like very limited injury on the highest rates of those, which were not necessarily as recommended for zoysia on the labels. And so there may be hope for, looking at next year. I'm going to look at some other species like Bermuda and centipede, maybe St. Augustine, as well as, continue to evaluate some of these zoysias, looking at how, like, if you're having trouble with control, can we put out something a little hotter, and how long is that going to be seen in the landscape and show that injury? So that's something I'm already working on with that. So next thing I want to talk about is where are we at right now in the weed control cycle. So we just finished up a couple weeks ago this idea that, you have goosegrass germinating pretty much all summer, starting probably in May, maybe even April, depending on your part of the state. The idea here, though, is I did want to bring this up. is that with goosegrass, you can have plants germinating like August 15th and produce viable seed before the first frost date, October 26th. So we just passed that like 3 weeks ago. And the idea here is, even though you may put out that early pre for goosegrass and crabgrass, and you may put out two there, but the idea is you need to make sure that you're controlling and keeping plants from being germinated all the way through, the middle of August, if not even later, depending on what kind of weather we have that year. Pretty much thinking like you're catching the end of goosegrass and crabgrass even, and then also trying to pick up the first of POA. So that's something I just wanted to mention, especially since we just got through it, and I've been seeing like especially some of the renovation areas we've done at Griffin campus. But there was like a lot of goosegrass pressure late. So the next thing I want to talk about is annual bluegrass, Poa annua. It's probably like it's the number one problematic weed in turfgrass, and I wanted to bring it up and talk about it specifically as it's like the most probably topical thing to talk about right now. But if any of y'all have not seen this, this is a paper that was done in the Tennessee Turf Weeds Lab with my previous advisor and previous one of my fellow grad students, modeling seasonal emergence of Poa annua in the urban green space. So what they found, and the biggest takeaway from this, is the largest flush of emergence is when 7 day soil temps hit 66 degrees Fahrenheit and you have a half inch of rain. So what I've done here on this next page is I looked at, 3 key places in Georgia, especially where our research campuses are, and took when we hit that 66 degree Fahrenheit soil temp of 7 day average. So in Blairsville, we hit that on October 20th. I was talking about that's like bleeding into you're going to have your largest flush and you still have goosegrass that's potentially producing seed heads. As well as the Griffin campus, that was 5 days later on October 25th. And then Tifton is October 31st. So, you're seeing this like around a 2 week difference in when we hit this like largest flush. And so you need to make sure that you're getting your pre's out to be the most effective. Really need to get those out before these dates, probably at the end of September, early October at the latest, because just because they aren't hitting these averages doesn't mean there's not germination before that as well. And also I did want to talk about, the current temps, 7 day soil temps as of the end of last week were 52 degrees Fahrenheit in Blairsville, 59.7 degrees Fahrenheit in Griffin, and Tifton at 60.9. So we're really in that peak POA season right now where they're probably continually germinating even after that main flush a couple weeks ago. So the idea here, I want to reiterate this, and the best way I've seen this described was by my previous advisor, like talking about, thinking about this like annual grassy weed control from a zone defense perspective. This also bleeds into some of those broadleafs, but, a lot of times the most problematic weeds and the most problematic weeds we do have are the annual grassy weeds, between crabgrass, goosegrass, and Poa annua. So with this, the idea is, you never want to have times of the year where you're like don't have overlapping chemistry coming down to make sure you've got that soil nice and covered with a pre-emergent to prevent, because it's a lot easier to keep them from getting up and then instead of controlling them afterwards. When we think about this, if you just put out your Poa annua starting with POA season, if you put out your Poa annua pre the end of September or middle of September, well, you're probably going to want to consider putting out another app to get through the rest of Poa annua season, probably like around the 1st of January, if not even in December, depending on what active ingredient you put out. Something like the thiopyr is not going to last as long as something like prodiamine or pendimethalin. That doesn't mean it's not as good of a product. That just means it's like, the half-life on that one is a lot shorter per the label directions. And Spectacle is one of those. It's probably got Indaziflam is one of those that has like one of those longer residuals, but that doesn't mean that you want to take it to the breaking point. You want to like look at those numbers, say, you're confident that Indaziflam is going to give you 4 to 6 months of control. We'll probably put something out at the around 4 month mark, maybe in the 3 month mark to make sure that you're picking that up. Because especially if you have a large concentration of a population coming up, the sole solution of that molecule isn't unlimited. So if there's a lot of stuff germinating in one area, then you might have breakthroughs. If there was like a huge emergence, they took up, all the spectacle in that one area, and then there's nothing left there to control the next set of flush. So what's next? Coming up, more POA. Like I said, you'll probably want to be thinking about putting out some sort of probably pre plus post mix. If not soon, depending on when you put out your pre, definitely the first of the year. Winter annual broadleaves. Most of the pre's you put down are going to have some activity on this, but probably also just thinking about putting out some sort of general group 4 mixture, something like that. And then, like I talked about with this zone defense, you already probably need to be thinking about, what are you going to put out at the 1st of January? Because that's likely going to get you to the beginning or, even a little bit past the beginning of crabgrass season a lot of times. So, thinking about thinking of that application, not only for annual, but also getting you through that first part of crabgrass season and, thinking about what you're going to apply there next. I did want to talk a little bit about this, like what my program and vision for what I want to do here is. So I'm 4.5 months in. I've seen some stuff. I'm looking forward to doing some more side visits, getting out in the States. I've already been doing a bit, making connections with agents as well as other faculty members to see where potentially collaborate with them and, really bring turfgrass weed science in the state of Georgia to like up to date as much as possible and even looking towards the future. And so my idea is, like I really love extension. I'm passionate about extension. That's why I wanted to be in this position. And so this position, I think it was on that original slide of Dr. Joseph introducing me, but it is 60% extension and then 40% research. So extension is my main priority. That's what I'm really passionate about. And I want the research to support that and really give you all applied solutions to some of the major problems that we're dealing with in the state of Georgia and beyond. So with that, I just wanted to, bring this up and say, this is like a closed loop circle. I want my extension to support the research. Those questions y'all ask me, I'm not always going to have an answer potentially, but that means that, that's an opportunity for me to take that questions you're giving me and, work towards finding you a solution if there isn't already one. And then, also on that research side, doing that applied research, it's going to allow me to answer those questions y'all have in the future with, some of the changes coming up, as well as, technology is really like evolving really quickly right now with some of those spray drones and also like AI sprayers, that kind of stuff. It's there's a lot to look at, and I'm excited to, be here serving you guys in the state of Georgia. So I will end on this. We'll also take a few questions, and I'll also put up my email. You're more than welcome to email me with your questions if it's pretty like very detailed, and I'll be happy to get back to you as soon as possible. But this survey is, I'm working to just like assess what the turfgrass weeds needs in Georgia are, and I want to be able to best support you all, and this is one of the best ways. It is a fairly lengthy survey. You may need to save it and take it after the webinar today, but I would really appreciate if y'all fill this out. It'll help me sort of see where I really need to start focusing my time from a research perspective, as well as, be also updating some of those resources that are already available and making sure that they're the most up to date, giving you all the best resources possible from an extension standpoint and anything else like that. Alrighty, with that, I'll also put up this please, like I said, take my email if you have any questions. Also reach out to your local agents if it's something specific or something specific, especially like in that county, and I can also work with them and you to make sure we're, looping everybody in together, and they can be my eyes on the ground because they'll generally know what I sort of need from them to, a lot of times help answer the questions, as well as feel free to follow me on X and LinkedIn specifically, as soon or once I start getting some more data and also, seeing things, I'll be, looking to disseminate some of that information through those. And so that'll be a good way to keep up with what we're doing at the UGA Turf Weeds Lab Georgia. So with that, I'll take any questions, and I'll also bring that survey back up, but make sure to just take a picture of my email or write it down or something. That way, if you need to get a hold of me.
Thank you so much, Ben. Any questions for Ben? Is it good? Any quick questions you have in your mind? Just ask. You can type it in the Q&A box, and I can read it for him. So I think there's one question. What can we do about dahlia grass?
Dallisgrass?
Yeah, I think it's Dallisgrass.
Dallisgrass. So some of your best options are going to be those sulfonylurea herbicides, but that are also like in a lot of options, or a lot of good options, or one of the best options still is probably, doing those like spot treatments with glyphosate, glufosinate, something like that, depending on the time of year. And also depends on, the specific situation. But a lot of times, especially with how problematic it can be, wiping on glyphosate, something like that is never a bad option. Just to, really try to, from a cost effective standpoint, as well as being able to apply it in any situation.
Great. There's another question, I think. Laying a post-emergence in fall, is atrazine a good one?
So atrazine will pick up some of that e-post. I would probably try to not rely on this is just blanket recommendation. it is okay to put one active ingredient out, but when you have the opportunity, it is always better to not rely on one single active ingredient, especially when it comes to annual bluegrass. Is how difficult it can be to manage sometimes. Doing that tank mixture of atrazine plus something like tenacity or something, and I don't know exactly if those can be tank mixed together. You would have to double check on that, but something that would also help pick up that e-post timing or post timing. That way you aren't just relying on one active ingredient, as herbicide resistance in annual bluegrass is very widespread, and you don't want to make the problem worse by taking away another tool that you might have.
Thank you. I don't have any more questions here. So Ben, thank you so much for your excellent talk. And it's a good way to introduce yourself to the industry. And your contact information is here. So
Yeah.
anybody wants to contact or any burning issues related to weeds, you know whom to contact, right?
Yep. Thank you all for listening to me, and I look forward to helping and working with you all. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Okay, with not to lose any time, let's move on. And our next speaker is the second speaker is Dr. Clint Waltz. And you're all familiar with Dr. Waltz. Dr. Waltz is a turfgrass extension specialist at the University of Georgia Griffin campus. Since joining the UGA in 2001, he has focused on turfgrass management for golf courses, sports fields, and residential lawns. His research emphasizes turfgrass species adaptation to environmental stresses, water conservation, and sustainable practices. Through statewide outreach, publications, and training programs, Dr. Waltz provides practical solutions for turfgrass professionals and homeowners across Georgia. Dr. Waltz, the floor is yours, okay?
Thank you, Schmott. And let's see, we'll get to sharing the right screen. And Schmott, Richie, please confirm that we're looking at the correct format of.
Yes.
We are?
Good to
Very
me.
good. Thank you. Appreciate y'all being present and here for it. I like this format that we have of concluding the year with a little bit of an update and overview that from our specialist here at the University of Georgia. And with that, I'll say we're really excited to have Dr. Ben Pritchard with us now as part of the team. As you might can tell, he's young, but I think that's a fantastic thing that he's bringing some new youth and vitality program into where we're heading. So the future is bright at the University of Georgia turf team right now with two new hires we've had this past year, Dr. Philip Vines as well as Dr. Ben Pritchard. So we've got that going for us right now for sure. So let's move into it, and kind of Ben's already alluded to some of the environmental conditions, and these data are current as of this morning. So each day I go on to www.georgiaweather.net. That's our Ag Environmental Monitoring Network that's statewide. I think there's now up to 90 weather stations statewide. I can't do this for every weather station, so this is just the one on the Griffin campus. And some folks say, well, it's not where I'm at. Well, you're right. It's not where you are, kind of thing. But it's somewhere between Valdosta and Ellijay and somewhere between Columbus and Savannah. So, it gives me a little bit of a barometer of just kind of where we are weather-wise and from environmental or climatic standpoint, why we're seeing certain things with in our lawns and landscapes and that type of thing. So let me set this up there. Obviously, in the morning, or on the x-axis down there, we have the months of the year. On the y-axis, we have our temperature. In this case, it's the average monthly maximum air temperature. So I go onto that website, I pull down the daily high. That goes in for the month, and they all get averaged. So, for example, in September, we have 30 days. So that data point, that purple data point right there is a 30-day average, whereas in August, that's a 31-day average for it, so of the daily highs. And the blue line that you see on this and the next slide are kind of those ideal ranges for cool season grasses to grow on those. So that blue line, cool, blue, visual cue there, guys and gals, on it. So what do we see here is that September was actually fairly warm with it, and then I always kind of put up relative to the past 3 years. What I've learned through the years is that people's memory is fairly short. They say, oh, it's been a hot summer. Well, you look at the data, it's like, it's pretty normal, really, kind of thing on it. So people's memory is short, so let's look at things objectively. But we can say that this September, our high temperatures were a little bit above. It's hard to say normal, but they were certainly a little bit on average, a little bit warmer than what we are the previous 3 years with it. Right now, here we are in October. We're kind of pretty much right on par, but that's also after averaging only 11 days on it. So that could fall or that could rise. I know this coming weekend we're looking at temperatures into the 70s and maybe even low 80s, depending on where you are in the state. Get a little bit of a sense of where we've been. Overall, I would say if you go back to the spring through the summer, been just a little bit warmer this year than what we have been. August was an anomaly. Nice little dip there on August on it. But give you a sense where we are there. Many times the nighttime temperatures, so here or the lows anyway for the day. So same setup, only here this is the minimum temperature for the day averaged in over the course of the month. And don't be fooled a little bit. Yes, it looks like November is running a little on the cool side on the thing. I guess we are into November now, 12 days into it. But it's only 12 days, so we've got an opportunity for that to come back up. And we certainly, the cool temperatures we had first part of this week are greatly influencing those averages. If you look at most of the cool temperatures, we see fairly tight relative to previous years. November's a month where kind of some great deal of variability happens with it. So, for example, last year we're pretty warm November, whereas this year we're pretty cool relative to other previous years. And then look, we get into December and they're all stacked right about on top of each other. So all that to say is where we are, we're kind of right in there where the cool season grasses are really starting to take off. And that goes right back to Ben's point on a cool season weedy species like annual bluegrass. So not a surprise there if we're seeing that one taking off a little bit. 4-inch soil temperatures. Again, we're running a little warm, but I think that's relative to where we were in September and October as far as the overall. So soil temperatures are going to fall slower than ambient air temperatures or even shallower temperatures will. So what this tells me right here is we're still in a real good spot for warm season grasses, root growth and rhizome development and that type of thing, which is good. We want those grasses to go to bed or go into dormancy at a little bit more of a moderate pace and hold on and be making sugars and carbohydrates as deep into the fall as possible so they're as healthy as they can and have as much energy to come out in the spring as possible with those. But what you might also notice going back into May is that our 4-inch soil temperatures overall have been relatively cool compared to the previous 3 years with those. And then as far as goes with rainfall, here we are with it, looking at those purple bars again. I would say this year's been I'm going to use a bad term here, and it's somewhat weather related, but it's been a bit bipolar, kind of dryish in the first quarter of the year, second quarter real wet, and then here the third quarter moving into the fourth quarter relatively dry again. So either on the gas or off the gas, but if you total it all up, and I have that as well, those data I'd look at, we're really not in a dry period, at least for the Griffin on us. We get periodic dry, but as far as the overall total rainfall, we're actually probably ahead of where we are on average for the previous 3 years. So when folks start talking drought, I kind of look at it with one eye closed, my head cocked, and going, well, really? Let's look at the total. Let's not look at what we got just last week or last month. And certainly that can explain some things, and I think that's part of some of those soil temperatures. But overall, it's kind of hard to look at some things and just say we're in a drought. Yeah, drought the last 3 weeks, but not drought for the last year. So it all depends on where you look. And then that, of course, factors into surface battlements and that kind of things. Water retention. So what am I seeing right now as I move around the state? Of course, I'm always moving around the state. Most of our warm season grasses, so Bermuda grass, Zoysiagrass, centipede grass, St. Augustine grass, they're still pretty much greenish. Our non-irrigated September and October were extremely dry. And so I saw those go off color a good bit. And most of that I think was related to those dry conditions, warm, dry conditions that we had in September, October with those. Irrigated lawns, professional areas like sports fields, golf courses, and that kind of thing where water was available to them, we're still holding pretty good green color. I had a homeowner email me the other day about some Zoysiagrass and just say how excited he was that his Zoysiagrass was still holding good green color after we were down in the low 20s where he was. And I said, well, be patient. Yes, you didn't have any frost because the wind was blowing that particular night. But those cold temperatures, it may take them 5, 6, 7 days before you see the impact of that as far as there's a change in color. But overall, I'm still seeing for it to be middle of November, relatively green grass on it. We had in Griffin a light, and I will say light frost event Tuesday morning. So anything south of here, probably even less so. And anything north of here, it may have been a little bit heavier. But again, while it was cold, the wind blew, and you tend not to have as much frost development whenever the wind's blowing. It's just too much energy in the atmosphere with those. So, with it, grasses, of course, are responding to those environmental cues, which are cooling temperatures and shorter photo period. Me saying shorter photo period is same thing as many folks like to say short days. All my days have 24 hours in them, so thankfully they're not any shorter than that because I got plenty to do out there. So, but the photo period, as it is shortening, the grasses, our warm season grasses, are certainly responding to that. Was there anything we can do right now keeping those upper 2 to 4 inches wet? We had a rain event last Wednesday or Thursday, Friday, I believe it was, which was exactly what we needed going into this cold Sunday, Monday, Tuesday that we had this past week. So getting a little bit of water into that root system was a benefit, and have a plant opportunity to uptake some of that and prevent some desiccation. So that rain we got last Thursday, Friday, Saturday, whichever it was for you, was probably exactly what we needed coming into the first part of this week. So don't be surprised. Again, we may have gotten down into the 20s across the state on average because the wind was there. We didn't get a whole lot of frost. Don't be surprised if we retain some green color. That wouldn't surprise me at all as we continue to move through. So although it's been cold, doesn't mean our grasses will completely go off color with those yet. Other questions I get this time of year that some of you may be experiencing or have had your own. This one comes up every year this time of year. What do I do with the leaves? Leaves fall off my trees. What do I do with them? I'm going to leave them on the grass or don't? And you can go to the Google machine out there, and it can tell you all kind of wonderful things to do. But here's where I look at it. I say remove those leaves. If there's any chance that you've got green grass down there of your warm season, if it's green, it's photosynthesizing, has capability of photosynthesizing. So get those leaves off, let the sun get to that grass, let it photosynthesize, let it make those sugars, let it store those sugars. And then through that, you've got a healthier plant moving into dormancy and then more stored reserves to come out next spring. That's the primary reason I say remove those leaves. A secondary reason on that is leaves hold moisture right at that soil surface. And by holding moisture, you can wind up encouraging disease. So most of our disease, or all of our diseases really in turf, are fungal based, and they need about 12 hours of free moisture. So if you get a little bit of dew and it's sitting underneath those leaves, then that moisture stays and hangs around, and it just creates a nice little environment for disease to occur. And we'll talk about disease here in a few minutes on it. So primary, get the leaves off such the grass can photosynthesize and do what that green stuff in it's supposed to do. Second is, let's get those leaves off, allow that canopy to dry down, dry out a little bit, and actually mitigate any potential disease on it. Then people say, do I bag my leaves or mulch them up with a mulching blade or mower or whatever? Frankly, I don't care on those. The objective here is get those leaves off. I would encourage you to keep your leaves in your landscape, mulch around your ornamental bed, something like that. There's no sense in sending them off to a landfill with those. So if you have some place to use them, go for it. I think that's the thing to do out there on those. But definitely, if your grass is still green, get the leaves off, let that plant photosynthesize on it. Nice thing about these types of things is that as we come up with new products, we can introduce them to you. This is one that I have just become aware of myself. Unfortunately, I have not worked with this one. It's a Syngenta product, Trofinity. It is a new nematicide out there. It's in the same family as the Indemnify. And these data and information are coming from Dr. Billy Crow at the University of Florida. He just shared these with me in the last couple of days out here. So this is the first time I've presented this information out there, and I'm excited to be able to tell you we have a new nematicide. And we'll kind of back up, but the last check mark down there to me is what's really exciting is the site uses. All pesticides are labeled by brand name and site use. Here, the fact that we actually have lawns on there for a new nematicide, I think is encouraging for many folks out there. Of course, golf courses and athletic fields very much need these as well. So do sod farms. but historically we've had a hard time getting a nematicide label for lawn use, residential lawn use. Well, this one is there. So this one and Indemnify both have a residential lawn site use for them. So this is an option that you have out there. So our folks that are listening in from lower part of the state, sandy soils, if we know we've got a nematode problem, we have another tool in the toolbox. Dr. Crow has seen it be quite effective on endoparasitic nematodes. So these are the ones that live inside or somewhat inside and outside the root, things like root knot and lance nematodes. Sting is another major nematode species, and this one is shown quite effective on it. It's in the SDHI family. Like I said, it's like we have several fungicides that are in SDHIs, but Indemnify is another nematicide that we have out there on it. So this is there. Caution on the label, the LD50 is greater than 2,000 milligrams per kilogram, so relatively safe whenever it comes to mammalian toxicity. So I'd have to go back and check, but I think table salt's actually much lower than that. Slow soil movement, so it doesn't move real fast. It's there where the nematodes are. It's persistent for 8 to 12 months out of some of the work that Dr. Crow has done down at the University of Florida on it. And then most importantly, no turfgrass phytotoxicity. I try to make it a policy of not to talk about something other that's not commercially available. This one right now has just received its label from EPA. So it has just now become, in the last week, become actually available and labeled. I'm not sure that the state of Georgia has labeled it yet through the Department of Ag. I would assume that's just forthcoming. And then likewise, it being in your commercial landscape outlets for sale. If it's right now, here we are in November, you're not quite ready for it yet, should be there in the spring whenever soil temperatures start to rise back up and nematodes are a problem. So this is not a bad time for it to be kind of in this transitional period or being introductory period on it. But still, I'm going to say this is exciting because many times you call me, I don't have many options. And, here we have another one with some really good research behind it, some excitement behind it, and the fact that it's on lawns just is really a plus here on this one. So congratulations. Y'all get to hear about this one early on and quick out of the gate. Brown patch, large patch. I'm going to, for the sake of time, I know I'm running through these things pretty quick right now, but refer you to Dr. Martinez's circular. Probably just as easy to Google UGA Turf Circular 1088 to get to it. But I'm seeing this out there. We've gotten enough warm temperatures and some timely rains or irrigated lawns where we're getting large patch. So this is a Zoysiagrass lawn. I looked at a St. Augustine grass lawn last week in this case as well. So we're seeing some large patch out there. It's seasonal. This is the right time of year, especially with the temperatures that we have been having, as warm as we were through October and September and October with it. So not a surprise with it at all. Thing you have to remember here is if it's sick going into dormancy, it's not going to get appreciably better during dormancy. So it will be slow to come out of dormancy. So if you have some spots like this that are large patch, while they may not be active right now here today, they have been. The grass has been affected. We wind up getting frost middle or latter part of next week, maybe, whenever it could come along. The grass fully goes dormant. And then you come into next spring, March, April, and you realize some of these spots are delayed relative to other grasses. Well, go back to think what happened in October, November, what you were seeing then, and it will explain why some of those areas are not greening up as quickly with those. Like I said, I looked at a pretty bad St. Augustine grass one last week on it. So let's talk about what fungicides do and what they don't do. You have some groups of fungicides out there that will arrest disease, and other ones act as plant protectants. What they don't do is control disease indefinitely. I have homeowners are the worst, but I've had some professionals out there as well. I'll put a fungicide out. Well, you do it just once. That's not going to be sufficient. The fungi they're in the environment. They're ubiquitous. So just a one-time application does not mean that you've controlled it for good, that it's all taken care of. That's not the case. It does most of the time they don't control all phases of the pathogens, particularly the resting or overwintering phases of the pathogen with it. So those are nice little periods or structures are part of the pathogen that allow it to persist and survive under adverse conditions, and fungicides have a hard time getting to those particular phases. So some things they just don't do or whatnot. Expectations, and I would encourage you, any of our professionals in the room, to manage expectations with your clients. Fungicides are not one and done type products out there. You're going to get a range of 14 to 28 days of residual of a product, depending on what the product is. Some are better than others. Some have a shorter residual, some have a longer one. And we'll cover that here in just a minute. Curative versus preventative, or arresting the disease, an active disease, stopping it, not letting it get any worse, versus prophylactic, putting it out before disease conditions are favorable and actually protecting the plant such that it has a fighting chance when conditions are favorable for infection to occur. This time of year, and actually probably earlier in the spring, September, October, particularly for Zoysiagrass, centipede grass, and St. Augustine grass, I don't think it's a bad idea on lawns that have a history of disease to actually take a preventative or prophylactic type of approach with it. And at the same time, you may want to have something where you can go out and arrest, make an application when conditions are favorable and you have an outbreak, and arrest it so it doesn't get any worse with those. So I get questions from homeowners, and so this may help some of you, and some of this you may not, but there's some principles here that are involved, whether you're working with homeowners or not. But so I took these next series of pictures of products that are on the homeowner market out there. So this is one out there, Disease EX. It's a Scott's product. If you look at the label, it's Azoxystrobin. It's a fungicide action code, a resistance action code of 11, so it's in that family with it. But azoxystrobin is going to have about a 28-day residual. And in this case, on this particular product, it's on an inert carrier. So it's just the fungicide alone with it. So fall, early spring on warm season grasses, particularly again, Zoysiagrass, centipede grass, St. Augustine grass, if you're in that prophylactic type of range, you want to put this product out before conditions become favorable. And then you're going to have to make repeat applications until we get cold enough that you wouldn't find disease activity on it. So having it on an inert carrier is a plus. All right. Second product that is on the shelf. Again, all these were taken at our big box retail stores. It's Propiconazole. It's a FRAC action code 3, or fungicide resistance action code 3. So 3 and 11 aren't the same. There's two separate families. So from a resistance management standpoint, you would wind up going with the first product. 4 weeks later, come back with this product. So that might put you into somewhere right around 1st of November. And then you might cycle back to that first product again, just alternating them back and forth. The propiconazole has a 21-day residual, so it's not quite as long-lasting as the azoxystrobin type of product with it. And fortunately, this one is one as well. It's a Bayer Bio-Advanced. It's a subsidiary or whatnot of Bayer, unless things have changed dramatically. This one, too, is on an inert carrier, so we're not putting out any fertilizer. So again, back from resistance management, 28 days, the Disease X, followed by your fungus control, or the Bio-Advanced product with the propiconazole 21 days later, and then just bouncing back and forth with those two kind of helps prevent any kind of resistance from developing out there with those. Now, you don't have to do it all winter long. Once it gets cold enough and stays cold enough, then environmental conditions aren't favorable for the fungus, and fungicide isn't needed. Now, this here product, this is a third fungicide that's on the market out there, Healthy Plus Lawn Food. Well, that lawn food ought to tell you something. Let's see, did I wind up? Nope, I did not. But it's on a fertilizer carrier of 19010. So this time of year, or even a little earlier in the fall, this would not be a product we would recommend for Zoysiagrass, centipede grass, or St. Augustine grass, because we don't need to be applying the nitrogen fertilizer. Large patch is the same causal organism as brown patch on cool season grasses like tall fescue. So this would be an ideal product on tall fescue right now. So that CS down there stands for cool season species, fall and spring. And this would be a better product for warm season species in the summertime for things like dollar spot or something. Well, even then, that's not a great dollar spot. But in the summertime, late spring, or even the summertime with those. But again, those of you in the state or around southeast where you've got tall fescue, this would be one to consider there on this one. On it. Fertilizers, when it comes to warm season grasses, don't be misled by advertising. We really don't need any nitrogen on warm season grasses after 1st of September. It's just kind of an even nice little cutoff spot on those. If you need to apply something, I'd look at phosphorus and potassium. And I would encourage you, if you were considering putting out phosphorus, do that only after a soil test to show that you actually have a phosphorus deficiency. Phosphorus can cause some environmental issues, so phosphorus, if needed, is a huge benefit to the plant. But if not needed, let's not put it out. If we have sufficient soil phosphorus levels, let's not put it out and run the risk of causing a problem that we don't need to. Potassium, on the other hand, is environmentally benign, so it doesn't hurt anything environmental-wise, and it does help with roots and winter hardiness. And as we were seeing earlier, we still got some soil temperatures where we've got root growth, root activity continuing on with our warm season grasses. So potassium would not be a bad application right now while soil conditions are favorable. I just made this slide this morning for y'all. I came across this product the other day, kind of made me chuckle a little bit and scratch my head a little with it. Of course, analysis or the grade is the numbers on the bag. So the 24011, that's your nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. In reality, it's percent nitrogen, percent P2O5, and percent K2O in there on that one. And, here this is, we like to say that last application of the season, which would have been somewhere before September 1. It'd be nice to have like a 1-to-2 type of ratio of nitrogen to potassium. Well, here, this is a nice 0 phosphorus-containing fertilizer, 24011. It's not 1-to-2, it's almost a 2-to-1 with it. It still probably would have been fine. But really kind of what caused me to chuckle a little bit, that this is a professional fertilizer at a homeowner or retail outlet, big box retail. So I don't know what makes it professional. I guess the fact that you can wind up putting it in blue ink and nice little font and text across the bag and call it professional. You're probably not going to get called out on it, but I'm not sure what makes it professional turf fertilizer as opposed to just turf fertilizer. So I suspect there's no problem with this one here, but it's not one. This is not a fertilizer I would be looking to use on any warm season grasses right now. Again, any of my cool season folks, tall fescue, Kentucky bluegrass, this probably would be a very good product this time of year for any of those lawns. For those. Tall fescue, fertility, nice time of year. We've already spoke about that. Again, I'm trying to wind up pruning up so we wind up don't get beyond. This is a good time. We're getting past the good time window open for seeding tall fescue with it. We've talked about some of that in the past. Folks ask me which the best tall fescue. In general, what's being sold on the retail market, whether it's commercial landscape supply stores or your big box, we've got some pretty good tall fescue blends that are being put out there. I am the turf nerd that flips these things over, winds up reading the tags, and compares it back. You can ask what's doing well in my plots. I can tell you, but there's no guarantee the good ones in my plots produce enough seed that actually winds up getting put into a bag. There's a number of things that go into the products that are being sold out there beyond just how well does it do in Griffin, Georgia under heat and dry and humid conditions of the summertime. But just trust me whenever I say that I'm looking at these bags. I do a survey a couple of 3 times a year where I just walk into various retail outlets, flip the bag over, look and just see what cultivars, and by and large what we have, we'll say mostly are B pluses. Every now and then an A minus kind of sneaks its way in. So we're dealing with some pretty good blends that are coming and hitting our retail market out there. So use those. Mowing, and I think this is almost my last slide, Shemot. So I get asked about mowing this time of year. The reality is wherever you've been maintaining it, keep it right there. Don't increase it. Don't lower it. So take it into dormancy right where you've been maintaining it the last little bit, and then we'll bring it out of dormancy next spring at the same mowing height. If you've been mowing your St. Augustine and tall fescue right around warm season grasses, your St. Augustine 2.5, 3 inches, there's no sense in raising your mowing height. Let's stay right there where you are. Same thing with centipede grass, 1.5, 2 inches. Wherever you've been, right in that range, keep it right there. Don't lower it. Don't raise it on it. And Bermuda grass and Zoysiagrass, 1.5 inches, somewhere in that range is kind of where we want to be. Tall fescue, 3 inches, and really the time of year right now, if you want to lower for tall fescue, you could drop it down 2.5, and start making tall fescue look really good. Let's see, upcoming programs. We have the Coastal Landscape Pro University down in Savannah on December 4th. We have Landscape Pro in Atlanta on January 28th, 2026. And then all of y'all I've been to know are sitting on the edge of your seat and wanting to know when the hottest day of 2026 will be. That will be August the 5th, because that will be Turfgrass Research Field Day in Griffin. So you can go ahead and pencil that one in on your calendar. Come to Griffin August 5th, learn what we're doing here, meet Dr. Pritchard, meet Dr. Fines. We've got a few other things starting to kind of line up on this one. Learn about grass, learn about the new grasses, learn about new techniques, new herbicides, and then we'll feed you some barbecue lunch and you come sweat with us on August the 5th. With that, Shmot, I'm willing to take whatever questions we have time for. And thank you for having me. I'll stop the
Hey, thank
sharing.
you so much. Hey, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Wonderful. So there is few questions, Clint. So the first one is, would the mulching leaves increase disease development?
Will mulching leaves increase disease development? Probably not. Nothing is definitive on those. But to me, if you wind up mulching them, and that allows those leaves to fall down into the canopy and kind of incorporate back in that way, by reducing them down, what's activity we still have on soil microbes, it makes it easier for them to break them down as well. So allowing air to get around those leaves in the canopy, the turf leaves, not the leaves, but the turfgrass leaves, allows them to dry out and reduce some disease potential there.
Okay, the second question. What recommendation for irrigation frequency during these cold months in the southern coastal region?
Irrigation frequency, if the grass has gone dormant, you really don't need to do an awful lot in the way of irrigation. Most of the time, it's our wetter times of the year, so natural rainfall is generally sufficient. As we move into February, March, or April, sometimes we'll hit some dry periods. And if you're putting out a half an inch every 2 weeks or so, half an inch of irrigation every 2 weeks under extreme dry conditions that time of year, that would be beneficial. But generally that's our wetter periods, and what we get from natural rainfall is every bit sufficient for those times of year.
Okay, another one. Well, how about combining SOC? I think that's the first fungicide you mentioned, and propiconazole. That's the second one you mentioned.
Mhm.
Combining this is okay, or is it better to use each as a standalone?
There are some products at the professional level out there where those are actually combined. So those are some prepackaged ones. Most of the time, that's on the professional side that have those. So for the average homeowner that's not out there, I would encourage them to use them separate and alternate back and forth. So even if you're combining them together and you're going out time and time and time again with them, you're setting yourself up for that resistance issue. So by having them split and going on the homeowner side, and even on the commercial landscape side, as infrequently as those I would probably encourage you to wind up doing them separate, not combining them. A
Okay.
golf course
Another question.
superintendent or a sports field may be a little bit different, because there's another group of herbicides fungicides they can introduce in and kind of break that cycle.
Straight. Another question. Agrium had a corn fertilizer that is 3,927 NPK or something like that with minor elements. Would this be a good winter fertilizer option?
Would this be good so it was a 3,927?
Yeah, 3,927.
It would be fine on grasses. I would not put them on warm season grasses this time of year. If you wanted to use something other like that in the spring, as it's coming out of dormancy, soil temperatures are, say, 65 degrees and rising at the 4-inch depth, that would be a fine one. And that sounds pretty close to what we like to think of as a starter fertilizer, which is a 1-2-3 type of ratio. So that 5, 10, 15 on it. So that type of fertilizer right there would actually be a pretty good one for any new establishment. So anybody doing seeding or sod work, that would be fine with it.
Okay. Another question. Typically, I put down a 540 NPK biosolid in November. Would you say it's a waste or danger to cause diseases?
When is that going down?
November.
In November?
Yeah.
On warm season grasses, I think it's a waste.
Yeah, I didn't say that specifically, but I
If it's
guess.
warm season grasses, it's a waste. So if it's a biosolid, that's going to be more of an organic, which means the microbial breakdown is going to have to get a conversion of a inorganic form of nitrogen before it's ever used. So it's going to sit there. It's not going to really be uptaken and used for the nitrogen standpoint. The P and K are going to be okay. Again, they probably have to be broken down microbially. So as those soil temperatures are cooling, the microbial activity is also subsiding. So that's not happening real fast. You're putting it down in November. You're likely not going to see any benefits or out of it until, say, mid to late spring as soil temperatures and air temperatures are rising. So I say it's of little value. You're not going to see any benefit. Me, I'd just wait until, if you want to use that, I'd wait till March to put it out.
Great. We'll take the last question, Clint.
Okay.
Some of my client Bermuda is in the 3-inch range. Is it good or lower it if the lawn is dormant? I'll read one more time. Did you get the question?
I understand it. Yes. So they want to know when's the best time to wind up getting it closer to what we recommend because they're growing it much too high. So yes, Bermuda grass is one that loves sun. So the taller it is, it shades itself out. So getting it back down, we can tighten our canopy density and that type of thing with it. Again, I would leave it right where it is right now. You open that canopy up, you have a chance of getting light down and some of those winter annual weeds that Ben was talking about today. So I would wait until we get somewhere we're growing, soil temperature's coming up and the grass is starting to grow. Then we can stair step it down next spring. So the objective would be is create some sub canopy as we bring it down. So drop the mowing height, let it establish for 2 weeks, drop the mowing height, establish. Over the course of about 6 or 8 weeks, you can get down to where you need to be on the thing.
Okay. I think I said it's the last question, but I will take this one too. So are there any recent UGA publications on turfgrass management in Georgia on sand-based fields? Are you aware of that?
Not on sand-based. We have one that's fairly old that I did with colleagues at Clemson and Florida. It's design, constructing, and maintaining Bermuda grass sports fields. It's, 15, 20 years old now, but I can promise you it's still one of the best and cost-effective resources out there. I think it's either $15 or $20 through University of Georgia. Last I saw, we're still somewhere right around 80, 90 copies of that available. So it's a hard copy, very inexpensive, but it covers all those things: design, construction, and maintenance of Bermuda grass sports fields, which includes sand-based systems on those.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Clint, for a wonderful talk and discussion. I really appreciate that.
My pleasure.
Thank you.